In the tumultuous waters of the North Sea, April 8, 1940, a David and Goliath showdown was about to unfold. HMS Glowworm, a British destroyer weighing a mere 1,345 tons, found herself isolated from her fleet. As fate would have it, she would soon confront the colossal 10,000-ton German cruiser Admiral Hipper. The disparity was evident, not just in size, but in firepower. Hipper boasted 8 8-inch guns, 12 4.1-inch guns, and 12 37mm guns, dwarfing Glowworm's 4 4.7-inch guns. Glowworm's journey to this confrontation was marred by misfortune. She had lost contact with the main British force while searching for a man swept overboard in rough seas. Her gyrocompass failed, and she had to navigate using a magnetic compass. As dawn broke, she spotted an unidentified destroyer, which soon revealed its hostile intent. The battle that ensued was fierce and relentless. Glowworm, despite being outgunned, drove ahead. Her decks were set ablaze, her hull battered, and yet she persisted. The German cruiser, with its superior firepower, rained down shells on the British destroyer. But Glowworm's captain, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roop, had a final card to play. As the distance between the two warships closed, Glowworm's intent became clear. She was going to ram the German cruiser. As a hardcore World War II history buff like us, you'll know that understanding military history requires more than just surface-level knowledge. That's where Babbel, one of the top language learning apps in the world, comes into play. Unraveling the craziest war stories or captivating accounts from soldiers who fought during World War II is only possible with the deep understanding that Babbel has allowed us to gain. With its comprehensive and unique learning model, you too can dive into original German sources of information. Every lesson is crafted and narrated by real native teachers and linguistic experts, not computers or AI algorithms, providing an authentic learning experience unlike any other. But Babbel is not only about learning German. Explore 14 different languages, including Spanish, Italian, French, and Russian. With an impressive 20-day money-back guarantee, you can be confident in the value you're receiving. Click the link in the description to get 60% off during Babbel's Black Friday sale and start speaking a new language in only 3 weeks. Allow yourself to learn a new language von der Pike auf, from the bottom up. Embrace the past and enhance your understanding with Babbel. The Royal Navy's 1933 construction program led to the order of a new destroyer, which became the Gallant-class destroyer Glowworm. Constructed at John I. Thornycroft and Company in Woolston, Hampshire, Glowworm was launched on July 22, 1935, and completed on January 22, 1936. With a weight of 1,350 long tons and 1,883 long tons fully loaded, Glowworm measured 323 feet in length, 33 feet in beam, and had a draft of 12 feet 5 inches. Powered by steam turbines, generating 34,000 shaft horsepower through 2 shafts, she could reach a maximum range of 5,530 nautical miles at 15 knots. Glowworm initially joined the first destroyer flotilla of the Mediterranean Fleet and took part in escort missions, including the escort of King Edward VIII on his cruise in the eastern Mediterranean. During the Spanish Civil War, the destroyer patrolled Spanish waters to enforce the Non-Intervention Committee's edicts. During night exercises, Glowworm also had incidents, like a collision with her sister ship, Grenade, but repairs were successfully carried out. When World War II began with Germany's invasion of Poland in September 1939, Glowworm was stationed in Alexandria. In October, her flotilla was transferred to the Western Approaches Command, and she sailed to the UK with her sister ships. The flotilla was assigned to the southwestern approaches, where they escorted convoys and conducted anti-submarine patrols. Despite being smaller in size compared to other destroyers, Glowworm proved her worth with her impressive speed at 36 knots. Armed with 4 4.7-inch guns, anti-aircraft weapons, depth charges, and 4 torpedo tubes, she was well equipped for various tasks. She was also a test ship for the new quintuple torpedo tube mounts for 21-inch torpedoes and carried up to 35 depth charges for defense. Towards the end of 1939, Glowworm was transferred to Harwich and joined the 22nd Destroyer Flotilla to continue her patrol work in the North Sea. In early 1940, Glowworm suffered structural damage after being hit by a Swedish ship while sailing through fog. After repairs in Hull, she rejoined the home fleet at its base in Scapa Flow. Then on April 5th, She was part of the escort for the battlecruiser Renown during Operation Wilfred in Norwegian waters, tasked with covering mine-laying operations in the disputed waters. But then, Hitler unexpectedly invaded Norway, catching the British off guard. The British response was cautious, as they didn't want to intervene in Norwegian affairs until it was clear that Germany would violate Norway's neutrality. Most British units stayed far away from Norwegian shores to prevent any German advances into the Atlantic. However, the safety of precious convoys destined for Britain remained the top priority for the Admiralty. Meanwhile, closer to the Norwegian coast, small Royal Navy units ventured north to lay mines off Norwegian ports and search for the German invasion force. During this mission, tragedy struck when a torpedo man named Ricky fell overboard from Glowworm during a fierce storm on April 6th. Concerned about the lost crew member, Glowworm's captain sought permission to leave the main group and search for the missing man, but she never came back. 2 days after sailing with her sisters, the destroyer was detached to search for the man lost overboard. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find him in the treacherous sea. As Glowworm attempted to rejoin Renown and the rest of the escort, they lost all contact due to the challenging conditions. The situation grew tense, and the weather got worse, forcing Glowworm to slow down to less than 10 knots. Adding to the difficulties, the ship's gyrocompass stopped working, and they had to rely on a magnetic compass to steer their way. The next morning, another sailor went missing. This time around, the man was found tangled in ropes trailing over the side. But the crew knew what this meant. The man was doomed, and so was the entire ship. As a sailor commented years later, quote, "Well, that was a bad omen indeed. For 2 consecutive mornings, something nasty had happened, and we were all asking what the third morning would bring." That gloomy morning, standing on the ship's pitching bridge, was Lieutenant Commander Gerard Broadmead Roop. At just 35 years old, he was already a seasoned seaman in the esteemed Royal Navy. His crew admired and respected him, affectionately calling him Ardover. He had a widespread reputation for making sudden and dramatic changes in course. Despite the difficulties, the crew stayed hopeful and tried to rendezvous with another group of British ships. Knowing that German units were nearby, they remained vigilant. But nothing could have prepared them for the epic encounter they would find on their path. As the sun struggled to rise, a dim light enveloped the ocean. In that eerie dawn, their ship unexpectedly collided with not one, but 2 huge German fleet destroyers, named Paul Jacobi and Bernd von Arnim. To make matters worse, the nearest German ship sent a confusing signal, claiming to be a Swedish vessel. But before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the enemy opened fire on Glowworm. Roop and his crew found themselves in a perilous battle against the powerful German destroyers. In Ramsay's words, quote, "Glowworm began her gallant fight, against odds from the start." On paper, Glowworm was not fit to fight on even terms with her opponents, with 5 5-inch guns and 8 torpedo tubes. In spite of the odds, Roop took on Jacobi, firing non-stop. Although the heavy seas flooded her gun director tower, she struck at least once. The relentless tides hammered the tiny ship, making accurate shooting increasingly difficult. The battle was intense, with the destroyers zigzagging at high speed, firing their guns at each other. The rough seas made it even more challenging for Glowworm, and they lost 2 crew members overboard. But they didn't back down. Suddenly, the German ships, both crammed with soldiers of the Norwegian invasion force, turned away. Then, it became evident to the crew that the Glowworm was doomed. As Ramsay later described, quote, "They were obviously trying to lead us on to something more powerful." Their brave captain, Roop, decided to continue their quest at all costs. Glowworm kept following the enemy ships, determined to gather information about the German fleet's movements and report back to their own forces. But soon, they encountered a much larger and more powerful enemy some 5 miles north-northwest, through the gloom, spray, and mist, the cruiser Hipper. Normally, he would have tried to follow and keep an eye on the mighty German ship. However, the weather was terrible, making it almost impossible to stay close to his opponent. So Roop decided to take a stand and confront the big German ship head-on. Hipper, bound for Norway and loaded with troops, was heavily armed with massive guns, posing a daunting threat to Roop's ship. But Roop was not discouraged. He was determined to fight back and inflict as much damage as he could. The battle commenced, and despite firing their torpedoes, glowworm shots fell short and couldn't reach the distant Hipper. It was a fierce and heroic struggle, and Roop knew he had to use every bit of skill and courage to hold his ground against the powerful enemy. The situation looked dire, and the brave crew of Glowworm knew their fate was sealed. Roop had one and only one purpose: to inflict as much damage as possible on the enemy before the inevitable end. Indeed, Hipper was pouring 8-inch shells at the helpless little ship with merciless might. So, in the lieutenant's words, quote, "We made smoke and began to close the enemy cruiser. When we got within range, I fired our torpedoes." 2 attacks were launched, but both times the 10 torpedoes missed their mark. Glowworm, now ablaze with a massive fire in the engine room, was on the verge of defeat. However, the captain of the Glowworm and his tiny crew were no ordinary sailors. They belonged to the Royal Navy, carrying on the honorable traditions of Grenville, Nelson, Rodney, Drake, and Jellicoe. Despite the odds stacked against them, they were determined to fight to the very end. As the fight raged on, the Glowworm suffered significant damage. One of her guns was disabled, the rangefinder was hit, and the mast's upper yard collapsed, causing sirens to wail futilely, which thereafter screamed incessantly amidst the chaos of smoke and cordite. In the face of adversity, Roop made a daring decision. He chose to ram Hipper. In the midst of chaotic explosions, Glowworm's radio room transmitted crucial information. Large German units were nearing the coast of Trondheim. The message reached London's Admiralty, who understood that the invasion of Norway had begun. Glowworm had fulfilled her important mission, and now she faced her final moments with bravery and determination. Sinking and burning, and with her fragile hull, Glowworm painfully altered course. Composed and calmed, Roop turned to his helmsman and ordered, quote, "Ram her." At 20 knots, she sailed straight into the side of Hipper. Now it was the Germans who could not answer quickly enough to avoid the charge in the raging seas. Risking everything in a single, last-resort, decisive move, Glowworm aimed for the enemy's starboard side. Despite facing a barrage of enemy fire, the destroyer steamed ahead. With a tremendous crunch, the destroyer's bow collided with the armor plating of the cruiser. The impact sent men sprawling across the deck amid blood, seawater, fire, and smoke. Nevertheless, those who could still stand picked themselves up and continued to fight. Glowworm jammed her prow deep into the cruiser's flank, just behind her anchor, ripping away some 130 feet of her armored side. Although the enemy remained in the fight, she was listing, with 500 tons of icy North Sea water weighing her down. Listing badly, Glowworm drifted away from her wounded enemy, leaving a dense cloud of smoke behind. As Glowworm pulled away from Hipper, they managed to fire back and even scored a hit at a close range of 400 yards. But the damage to their own ship was extensive. The bows were severely damaged, several shells had penetrated critical areas, and the aft superstructure was wrecked. Then, a German bombardment relentlessly pounded the sinking destroyer. The ship was in less than ideal shape, with a raging fire in the engine room causing it to tilt forward. Despite the dire situation, Petty Officer Scott, in charge of the last working gun, bravely continued firing at the enemy ship. On the bridge, Roop remained calm, smoking a cigarette, but he knew it was time to prioritize the safety of his crew. He gave the order to abandon the ship, and the sailors started making their way into the freezing water. The captain, though injured, showed remarkable leadership and helped with the evacuation efforts. The crew did their best to assist the wounded, fitting them with life belts in hopes they could stay afloat. As they struggled in the rough sea, disaster struck. Glowworm exploded and overturned, plunging those who were still alive into the icy waters filled with fuel oil. Among them was Commander Roop, now on the ship's keel, who remarked to a petty officer that they wouldn't be playing cricket anytime soon. Captain Helmut Hay of Hipper immediately sprang into action, doing everything possible to rescue the men in the water. He positioned his ship downwind of the sinking destroyer, allowing the exhausted survivors to get closer to safety. Despite the treacherous conditions, Hay's crew, along with some German soldiers, worked together to pull the men out of the water. Unfortunately, many of the Glowworm's crew were too weak and cold to hold on to the life ropes, and some slipped away and vanished into the waves. Among the survivors was Lieutenant Robert Ramsey, the torpedo officer, who was the only officer to make it through. The Germans treated the survivors with great respect, providing them with blankets and massages to help them recover. As for Roop, he fought valiantly to save his men, but in the end, he succumbed to exhaustion and the freezing cold. Captain Hay showed remarkable compassion by keeping his ship over the side of the disaster for more than an hour, ensuring that every possible survivor was rescued. The brave actions of the Glowworm did not go unnoticed, as Captain Hay acknowledged that their torpedoes had nearly struck their target. The German sailors displayed both honor and admiration for the Glowworm's crew, acknowledging the fierceness of the battle and caring for the survivors. After the incident, Hipper headed to Trondheim, while Glowworm disappeared beneath the waves. Remarkably, Captain Hay did something unprecedented, sending a carefully worded message through the International Red Cross to the British Admiralty. In this message, he recommended Gerard Broadmead Roop for the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest decoration for war. In July 1945, the London Gazette, the government's official organ, announced the award of the Victoria Cross to Gerard Broadmead Roop. Lieutenant Ramsey received the Distinguished Service Order, and 3 enlisted men, including Petty Officer Scott, were awarded the Conspicuous Gallantry Medal. Only 31 men survived the epic encounter. Thank you for watching our video. Ready to unravel history's hidden secrets like never before? Learn languages straight von der Pike auf, from the bottom up with Babbel. Click the link in the description to get 60% off during Babbel's Black Friday sale, and you'll be speaking a new language before the summer is over. Danke. Thank you. And see you in the app.